I recently posted a video talking about why I wasn't a big fan of the Army's new next generation squad weapon systems. And I thought I'd share it here because I had so many people asking, why didn't I like it? Why am I not a fan of this awesome new rifle? And before I get into all the reasons I have beef with this and why I think it's dumb, I'll give credit where credit's due. Things I like about this: the new optic, awesome. The suppressor integrated now, great, love it. I love the new machine gun. I think this is going to be a fantastic replacement for the 249 and the 240. And I even love the system overall. I think this is a great weapon system that SIG put together from everything that I've heard about it. The problem I have is with the new cartridge. The 7.62 by 51 is what we've had for decades. The new cartridge is 6.8 by 51, which is the exact same length. It's a little bit narrower. I think they shaved a little bit of weight off it, and it's a much spicier powder, so it has some pretty good recoil because you get some crazy chamber pressures, which is why it has that bimetal casing. And the reason they wanted to go with this is because in 2017 they decided they were concerned about programs like the Russian Ratnik program that was going to standardize body armor in threat militaries. And we want to be able to defeat that body armor and then also extend the range of the rifleman. The memory of Afghanistan was very close in everyone's mind, so we want to be able to shoot mountaintop to mountaintop. I understand, I get it, but there's some problems here because to do this, we have to, we have to pay the price, and there's no free lunch here. And here's the problem: the new rifle is 50% heavier, just off the back, 6.3 versus 9.8 pounds. It is significantly heavier. The spicier powder means that it's going to be significantly increased recoil on top of that, which, is fine for the guys that can spend, many days at the range per year, the guys that can go to specialty schools, guys like, designated marksmen, Rangers, SEALs, SF dudes, like those guys will get their practice. They'll be able to handle that. The problem is that this is going to the riflemen, right? The 18-year-olds that are coming out of basic training that are going to the range as many times a year as they can, but it's never going to be enough to make them as proficient because that heavier weight and heavier recoil is going to make it harder to hit your targets with. So already we're kind of fighting against the extending the range of the rifleman. We're already kind of making it harder for the rifleman to hit targets, right? The bigger problem, though, is the 20-round magazines that are going to be used instead of the 30-round mags that has been standard for decades. And here's the problem there. This is a 7.62, which we can see is pretty much the same size as the 6.8. There is a significant jump in size from the 5.56 to the 7.62, right? When we look at these magazines, they're big, right? This is a 20-round magazine for a 7.62 versus a 5.56 magazine that's 30 rounds. So 33% more ammo goes into there. And what that ends up looking like is, the standard load of these is 7 magazines. If we do the same thing and everyone carries 7 magazines, that's immediately dropping down to a combat load of 140 rounds. That's a lot. That sucks. Ask anybody that's ever been in combat, are they happy with less ammo? And that's a scary amount of ammo. That's, by comparison, you're already kind of reaching the halfway point of what you would want to be out there normally with. And then, sure, we could just carry, more magazines, but, we've got to find places to put them. It's 30% heavier, so what else are we going to drop? Or are we just going to make our infantrymen that much more burdened? Because everyone knows light infantry is not light. It's heavy, and you're already carrying a ton of stuff. Are we going to be going up to 90, 100-pound rucks? That's outrageous. And all of this needs to be reminded, what actually wins gunfights? What does the infantry, the light infantry, the guys that are unsupported, what do they need to be able to do? Generally, and there's been lots of studies on this that talks about this, gunfights are won by fire superiority, having more rounds going out than going in, which you need a lot of ammo for to do sustained. Maneuver tempo, for the soldiers to be able to maneuver and get from point A to point B to, attack from different directions and get the angles they need to go to, which requires lightness of kit as best as we can. And then adequate accuracy and adequate lethality. Because when we're talking about, fighting at, squad and platoon levels, these rifles are not going to be, they don't need to be Olympic grade, President's 100, hitting a nickel at 500 meters. That's not what we're going for. We are trying to engage human-sized targets at a reasonable distance of around 100 to 300 meters. That's where we normally find these engagements outside of Afghanistan, like super open areas, especially when we're looking at the urbanization of combat, where we're not looking at like all these different these super rural areas. It's nice to have as like a designated marksman, like we talked about, but it's not something that everybody needs to have. And then lastly, adequate lethality. In the same vein, we don't issue 50 BMGs to everybody because that's far more bullet than is required to take down the average enemy soldier. The 5.56 has been fantastic at eliminating threats. Sure, it's not going to defeat all soft armor. It's not going to penetrate through everything. But if you unload a magazine on a person, even if they're wearing body armor, it's probably all not going to hit the body armor. 7.62 hasn't defeated all body armor either, but it's still very effective. It's important to make sure that we're choosing the ammunition that we need for the general purpose, because it's also worth noting that the body armor threat hasn't really materialized. We see in Ukraine, we see in China, most enemy nations are not able to field body armor in numbers that it makes this a real concern. The bigger concern is logistics, making sure that we have enough, that guys can carry enough to just be able to be comfortable just laying down heavy fire to support that maneuver and fire superiority. So places where this rifle would do really well is anywhere where, the DMR role, where guys are very well suited for, they have the extra training, they can carry the extra ammo, that's one guy in a squad. Awesome. Makes sense. Gives that squad a little bit extra reach and a little bit more capability. Or in positions where you have lots of extra ammo that you can stage, specifically like fixed defensive positions, or if you have vehicle support, they can carry that extra ammo. The problem here is that in those scenarios, you're already going to have heavy crew-served weapons, not just, the medium machine guns, but 50 cals and Mark 19s. And you're probably going to have, support from indirect fire and all that stuff. Like, we already have weapon systems in those situations that can extend the range and defeat body armor, and it's far more lethal than any cartridge that we can put in the hands of a rifleman, because they can be delivered in mass. The rifleman is the one that's going to need to be able to get out, pull security around the vehicle, or counterattack and be able to move fast and quick with as much ammo that they can carry. That's where this stuff needs to be oriented towards, not towards giving everybody some massive bullet that they don't need, right? So, lastly, to wrap up, there were a few alternatives. We could have just kept the 5.56 platform. I still say there's nothing wrong with that. It's cheap, maintains existing supply lines, and maintains standardization across our allied nations. We could have equipped line units with longer barrels, basically just say, okay, guys, every unit gets an equal number of 20-inch uppers, M16 uppers, basically, to match, increase that range and increase lethality, and you could swap it out for different environments. Or lastly, the Army checked into this and decided they didn't want it, was to switch to the 6.8 SPC cartridge, which requires minimal work, a swap of a barrel, bolt, and magazine, but it's basically the same size as a 5.56, just a little bit bigger bullet at the end. And it's got increased range, lethality, barrier penetration, all that stuff, but really a negligible change to weight and capacity. That could have been cool, and there's some more ballistic improvements to be made there. But really, that's it. I think it's a silly design. I don't think we should be trying to reinvent the wheel when we've got existing ammunition and weapons that do really well. But let me know what you think down below. This is obviously up for discussion in my own opinion, but I'm happy to be proven wrong if anyone has some startling new evidence to share.